The conference is about to commence. Kindly take your seats. The conference is about to commence. Kindly take your seats. Welcome to Africa Unlocked Conference 2025. Please welcome to the stage Bongani Bingwa.
Good morning, good morning. Hello, everyone. I think we can be a little bit happier. Good morning, everyone. A very warm welcome to Africa Unlocked 2025, as of course hosted by Standard Bank Business and Commercial Banking. This is in fact only our second gathering, and boy, I tell you, if anything, last year, this year promises to be even better if last year was anything to go by. Certainly, I think the momentum we've gained from a year ago and the excitement that's palpable as I was walking outside and watching so many people chatting and getting excited to be in attendance this morning. And of course, many of you have come from far and wide. You've already heard, my name is Bongani Bingwa. I'm a broadcast journalist based in Johannesburg. I'm the host of 702 Breakfast, and I'm told reliably that there are a lot of unhappy people in Johannesburg this morning because I'm not on the radio. But their loss is certainly going to be your gain. So I'm absolutely thrilled to be with everyone today. We meet on the anniversary of a seminal moment, I think, in African history, because it was back in 2002, July, this very week, that the Organization of African Unity was officially dissolved in Durban. And of course, in its place, like a rising phoenix, as you will recall, it was replaced by the African Union. And it is in that light that we look forward to hearing from two very distinguished delegates a little later on. All of our delegates, of course, and panelists and speakers will be absolutely fantastic, but I think these two deserve a special mention. Firstly, His Excellency Ndaba Haulate, the Vice President of the Republic of Botswana, and of course our own former Deputy President, Dr. Phumzile Mlambo Ngcuka. One of the things that has happened in my personal life, if you will indulge me, is since I last saw you, I have entered the 5th floor. I'm officially 50. This now means I'm allowed to make dad jokes. So throughout the day, I will not spare any of you. One of the themes this week, as we will be gathering over the next 2 days, certainly has to be about resilience. And funny enough, my mother turned 85 this week, and she and I have amazing conversations. She's a fantastic storyteller. And I'd forgotten, of course, the day, and my daughter reminded me, and so by the time I came to say happy birthday to her, she said I'd ruined her day. I said, what do you mean? She said, you've ruined my day. I said, but I didn't even know it was your birthday. How could I have ruined your day? At R&B, they really laughed at that one. So I asked my mother this question. I said, what is the biggest lesson you have learned at 85? She says, you must embrace your mistakes. And she promptly gave me a hug. All right, Trevor Noah was not available. We'll get serious. We're at a time where, once again, Africa, I think, seeks to define its role in the global economy. And we know these are tumultuous and uncertain times. But Standard Bank supports the hope that we are indeed at the threshold of a transformational decade, one that will establish Africa as a powerhouse of innovation, of trade, and sustainable growth. Hence, Africa Unlocked 2025 aims to be a premier global platform, convening some of you who are, of course, the continent's most influential leaders, investors, policymakers, and entrepreneurs. It's an exclusive gathering that's more than just a conference. It's a strategic movement, hopefully to shape the future of African commerce, investment, and industrialization. So expect dynamic dialogue and cutting-edge insights. It's a real treat also to be in this wonderful setting at the Norval Foundation here in Cape Town. Please take some time to look at some of the exhibitions in the various rooms. They really speak to the 30 years of South Africa's democracy, our struggle for inclusion, our struggle for unity, and coming together as a young democracy. But perhaps before we proceed to some of the formalities, let's quickly go through some of the house rules, if you'll indulge me. For anybody who doesn't know, the Wi-Fi code, you simply select the username Standard Bank, and the password is Africa Unlocked, all small caps. So if you need your device to be on the Wi-Fi. But also, of course, as a sign of respect to all the speakers, may I ask that we put our phones on silent? I'm going to give everyone an opportunity to do that because we always think they are, and then it rings. As we do that, take note, the emergency exits. This is always very important because in case of an emergency, this is the strict rule. The protocol is you allow me a chance to get out. No, the exits are clearly marked throughout the room. Will be directed accordingly should there be the need. And of course, no smoking is allowed in this building. The smoking section is in the foyer in the front area. The bathrooms are located as you exit this main plenary room. To your left, as the Beyonce song says, to the left, quite literally, you will turn left and left again, and then you'll see the bathrooms. If you need medical support, we've got facilities available on site. And if you need to charge your phone, the charging stations can also be found at reception. If you have any special requests, please speak to the production team at the back of the room. And one last note before we commence. I'm not alone this year. I'm really so excited. I'm joined by an industry colleague who is a renowned financial journalist. I'm sure many of you have spoken to her many times. Fifi Peters will be co-piloting with me. She will be coming up on stage after our first speaker. And that, of course, is a man who really needs no introduction. In every sense, our host at this gathering. Please, folks, would you give a warm welcome to Bill Blackie, the Chief Executive Officer for Business and Commercial Banking.
Right. Thank you, Bongani. Good morning and welcome to Africa Unlocked 2025. I know it's a little fresh outside, but since I was a young boy, I've always thought that winter is a wonderful time of year. It's chilly, but the air is also clear and crisp, refreshing and invigorating. It's a season that I think also brings a sense of hope of imminent growth, and it follows in the springtime. I want to start by saying thank you for being here. Many of you have traveled a long way to be here with us, investing your valuable time and resources. It's a privilege to stand with you, Africa's business leaders, entrepreneurs, investors, policymakers from across the continent. I'm confident that during the course of today and tomorrow, the topics of discussion will be enriching, the opportunity to engage plentiful, and most importantly, the opportunity to lean in as the catalysts of growth in Africa. It was wonderful to meet and reconnect with you last night at the Zeitz-Marke. What a fabulous venue. It was designed to create a platform for African art that seamlessly blends modern aesthetics with historical context. This wonderful Norval Foundation, where we find ourselves today, is equally impressive. With an intent to allow the natural environment and African artwork to take center stage. It's a fitting venue for Africa Unlocked, where over the next day and a half, the critical themes shaping the future of Africa's commerce, innovation, investment, and industrialization will take center stage. Businesses in Africa are the engines of growth, with the ambition and the ability to make big plays that will transform the continent for generations to come. It's why we believe that Africa Unlocked is more than a conference. It's a platform for action, a shared space to align, to connect, to lean in, and to build. Over the next 2 days, you will hear from some of Africa and the world's most influential voices, from tech pioneers and next-generation entrepreneurs, policymakers, and financiers. We'll explore the future of African industrialization in a post-carbon world, SME growth and regional value chains, family businesses and intergenerational wealth, agriculture, energy, infrastructure, and digital innovation. And importantly, our continent's role in shaping a new global order. In a world in which every day we face a deluge of news about tariffs, inflation, unemployment, commodity prices, geopolitics, exchange rates, and energy transition, and many more, it's easy to be overwhelmed, to lose sight of progress and the potential for growth. Last year, at the first edition of Africa Unlocked, I shared that I've always regarded myself as an optimist, especially when it comes to Africa and our growth prospects. As I stand before you today, I remain as an optimist and as optimistic as ever about Africa's prospects. But I'm certainly not an economist, and Gulam Balam, our chief economist, is, and he will share his insights and also the case for optimism. Why then am I bullish about Africa's prospects? One of the best parts of the work that I do is that I have the greatest privilege of spending time with you, our clients. Sub-Saharan Africa's GDP is forecast to grow by 4.3% this year, outpacing much of the rest of the world. So what is driving that growth? It starts with family-owned businesses. We believe that they are central to Africa's future. These businesses are not just custodians of legacy and culture, but they are catalysts of growth, driving economic value, providing employment, and demonstrating sustained innovation and resilience. Through partnerships with the right governance and capital structure, they can become the next generation of corporate giants, drivers of multi-generational wealth. As an example, we have amongst us today Moakazakh Estates, who celebrated a 100-year relationship with us. It's wonderful to have you in the room with us today again, Francois. By 2040, Africa's population is expected to grow to 1.2 billion people, almost twice what we have today. But throughout history, industrialization and economic prosperity has relied on access to energy. By 2030, Africa's green economy is expected to create 3.3 million jobs, particularly in off-grid solar, sustainable agriculture, and clean mobility. In countries like Kenya and Nigeria, solar irrigation is already transforming agricultural production and quadrupling rural incomes. Since 2022, BCB has mobilized almost 11 billion rand in green financing, enabling over 1,500 businesses across our markets to transition towards renewable energy and smart agriculture. We are working hard to do much, much more. From solar-powered dairies to off-grid vineyards to solar-driven farms, our clients are leading Africa's green transmission. As a small example, we recently supported one of our large agricultural clients in Mpumalanga to build a 25 million plant, the largest private project of its kind in the area. Within weeks, it powered 2 farms, 26 households, saving almost 500,000 rand of energy costs annually. A small but powerful example of the resilience through renewable energy. It's not just a financing solution, it's an example of our focus to support systemic shift to a low-carbon, resilient economy. Business and commercial banking is present in 14 African markets. We also have presence in 3 offshore markets, the Isle of Man, Jersey, and Mauritius. Our solutions are to ensure that we provide African entrepreneurs with everything they need to thrive both domestically and internationally, managing their onshore and offshore capital and liquidity needs. The combination of onshore and offshore solutions really enables us to support one of our Nigerian clients to confidently expand to Kenya and Uganda, seamlessly scaling their payment platform to process over 5 billion transactions annually. The solution, driving digital inclusion for millions of small businesses across East Africa. Trade is also a powerful engine for growth in Africa. The demand for sustainably produced, high-quality agricultural products continues to grow, not only outside Africa, but within Africa too. To that end, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement is expected to boost inter-African trade by over 50% and create 300 million new jobs by 2035. We are actively working with the Secretariat to play a leading role in supporting its success. Our shared task is to build the infrastructure, the trust, and the financial mechanisms to make this a truly borderless economic zone. But while driving intra-Africa trade, we also recently host 43 of our clients from across Africa at the China Africa Economic Trade Expo in Changsha, Hunan. I was there myself with our clients. It was incredible to see China announce 0 tariffs for 53 African nations. Later this year, we will again host clients at the China International Import Expo, hosted in Shanghai. Events like these enable us to connect African producers to dynamic markets such as China. This year alone, we have seen demand for African agricultural products in this corridor surge by 27%. Additionally, trade brings with it substantial opportunity to transform Africa's industrialization. And in 2024, BCB facilitated over 100 billion rand in trade between Africa and China, reflecting a compound annual growth rate of 20% over the last 5 years. Through trade, Africa can also access world-class technologies, ensure value addition at source. We've also been successful in the last few years of introducing Chinese original equipment manufacturers to our clients who've benefited from the world-class technology. One of our clients in Zambia has installed a complete food processing plant. It really is a truly world-class facility that drives local production and has already created local employment. In BCB, we also aim to play a very active role in participating meaningfully in thought leadership in Africa. To that end, we partnered with the Wits Institute for Social and Economic Research to establish the Standard Bank Chair in African Trust Infrastructures. This is an investment in the intellectual capital that enables trust to flourish. Through this program, we support doctoral candidates researching foundations of trust in African economies, while also convening thought leaders across academia, policy, and public sector. The chair hosts seminars, lectures, and debates on how trust shapes everything from financial inclusion and investment to social cohesion. We all interact every day with trust infrastructures, whether through digital authentication, credit systems, or customer relationships. Our partnership with WISER deepens this understanding, helping us and the continent build the intellectual and institutional foundations needed to unlock growth. And I'm delighted to have Professor Keith Breckenridge join us today and listen to his insights. I share these examples with you not in any way to be boastful, but rather to emphasize the meaningful progress that is happening in and across Africa, and why I believe my optimism is well-founded and rational. At Standard Bank and in business and commercial banking, we believe in leaning in, not idealism, but leaning in with intention. We are committed to being the catalysts for growth in and across Africa. Africa holds the promise of sustained real growth. So we gather here, surrounded by art and nature, unified in one purpose. Join us in becoming the catalysts for Africa's growth, because Africa's moment is here, and together we will shape it. Thank you very much.
And so I finally get my moment on stage. I have been waiting eagerly there through Bongani's absolutely wonderful opening, as well as that of Bill. And finally, it is my turn. Bill, you thanked us for being here. I think I'd thank you for inviting us here. I mean, as a Joburger, a trip to the Western Cape is always a good idea. And a trip, of course, to discuss a continent that I believe that we all have the privilege to call home, even better. So good morning, ladies and gentlemen. An absolute pleasure to be with you here today. An absolute pleasure to be sharing a stage with a voice that continues to guide South Africa through the chaos and the clarity. A voice, as he said, we have the privilege of having for the next 2 days. Sorry for the listeners over at 702, unfortunately. As Bongani did say, we are here to speak about the role of business in shaping Africa's tomorrow, the theme of this year's Africa Unlocked conference. And I'd argue that that role essentially has been played by business on the African continent for a very, very long time. Certainly, if I reflect on what the past 10 years or the past decade in South Africa has looked like, it's been littered with low growth and policy uncertainty and state capture and low business and consumer confidence. You all know the laundry list, but notwithstanding, as Bongani mentioned a little earlier, you as business have pushed through all of that, essentially embedding resilience within your DNA. I'd also argue that what is happening right now globally perhaps is not entirely untested ground. Bill made reference to it, and I'm sure that Gulam is going to make us even the more wiser about it in his presentation on the economic outlook. It's not entirely untested ground, just given the fact that one can argue that the period 2016 and 2020 was also trumped by mania, which notwithstanding, you as business pushed through in your pursuit to making tomorrow better. And so, if this is the view, I would ask the question as to what is different this time around. And if we argue that this time around is different, then I would argue and I would ask you what you, as business, plan to do differently this time around to ensure that the outcomes that you are able to achieve are successful ones, certainly successful ones for your children and your children's children and your children's children's children, and I think that you catch my drift. And so the panel discussion that we're going to be having this morning, it shapes that narrative quite nicely. Of course, it is around shaping, reshaping the African narrative, sort of resetting the perceptions that dominate the world about Africa, the good, the bad, the ugly. It's about unlocking some of the local potential that we have right now as a continent, and of course, just looking at the role of SMEs and enterprise in advancing the sovereignty that is of this beautiful continent. And I can tell you that the panelists this morning do read like a dream team of economic architects, in the sense that they have comprehensive experience collectively in policy making, in entrepreneurship, in business, as well as in finance. So allow me to introduce you to them, of course, beginning with no other than our chief host for the next 2 days, that is Sim Tshabalala, of course, the Group CEO of Standard Bank, as well as a board member of the International Monetary Conference and Vice Chairman of the Institute of International Finance. We do also, oh, by the way, sorry, I forgot to prompt them to say that they can perhaps maybe start making their way as I introduce. Sorry, Sim, my bad. Bongani's grandmother said we must embrace mistakes. So can you... We also have Dr. Agnes Kalibata, the UN Secretary, Special Envoy for the 2021 Food Systems Summit, and former Minister of Agriculture in Rwanda, as well as a former President of... So is that I'm speaking too much, sir? I see you clapped even before I was finished my sentence. It's fine, my editor also says the same. But must I skip to welcoming you? Okay, let me welcome... No, I can't. Protocol will not allow me, sir. But I'm about to introduce you in just a short while. But we are also, of course, in the presence of Mr. Saki Makozoma, Chairman of Safika Holdings, a prominent South African business leader, as many of you know, civil society advocate, serving also as the Group Chair of Vodacom and Director of the Volkswagen South Africa. And last but not least... You see what you did? Now the applause was delayed. But nonetheless, let's see how it works for you. Mr. John Bosco Sibabi, the Deputy CEO of the Pan-African Payment and Settlement Systems, and a seasoned financial sector expert with over 2 decades of experience in modernizing payment infrastructure across Africa. So good morning.
Morning, Fifi.
Yeah. I mean, Bongani made reference of the perhaps the lukewarm temperature in the room. I'm not against it entirely, just given the fact that the weather out there is lukewarm, although Bill did let us know that, I mean, winter is not entirely bad, it's beautiful. But I think that if we are going to have a conversation on reshaping the narrative, I think that it's important for us to just understand the vantage points and the departure points in which you think that this should be done by, and how you're feeling about the current environment. Sim. Bill did mention the flow of headlines on a daily basis, on an hourly basis sometimes, just depending on how quickly fingers move to post a truth. But I'd like to understand, you've invited us here today to speak about the role of business in shaping Africa's tomorrow, and essentially to expand on a theme that was began last year in terms of unlocking Africa's potential. But how are you feeling about the environment in which you have to do that right now, Sim?
Fifi, decidedly optimistic. And if I may, one of the reasons I'm optimistic is because of the great relationships that Standard Bank has got with its clients, many of whom are here and many of whom have traveled long distances. Bill and myself had to go and do some work in Kenya. He instructed me to join him, and I did. And
Oh, so he's the real boss.
yes, and he also then told me that I needed to be here, so we flew down here. But
Okay.
I make light of a very interesting phenomenon. There were a number of clients on that flight of Standard Bank that were coming to this event. So that's the first thing, the strong relationships with people that are really making a difference. But I'd like to give a shout out to another group of people who are Standard Bank's relationship managers who make this happen. And if I may, could they please stand up? All the RMs,
Was that regional managers?
relationship managers.
Relationship managers, okay.
Please give them a round of applause. So Fifi, it's firstly the clients that give us confidence, and then it's our relationship managers. Let me make then the next couple of big points, which is that pessimism is a choice, and optimism is also a choice. At Standard Bank, we choose to be optimistic. We believe that pessimistic nations are dangerous nations, and pessimistic people are dangerous people. You need to be skeptical and analytical, which is what our risk managers do, but they too remain optimistic. The next point is that Standard Bank has been in existence from October 1862 under the same name, and it has existed through all the phases of globalization. The period between 1815 to 1914, the golden age of globalization. Under the empire, Standard Bank was formed by businessmen in 1857 who saw an opportunity to facilitate trade between the Eastern Cape and the United Kingdom in that free trade area. They needed capital in that monetary union, which was the empire. And that is really the history of Standard Bank. During the height of apartheid, behind the closed tariff barriers, Standard Bank continued to identify opportunities and continue to grow. Today, Standard Bank's purpose is Africa is our home, we drive her growth. We wake up every morning coming to work to make a contribution to driving the continent's growth. There are a number of reasons why we believe that, notwithstanding all these headlines that you're referring to, the first one is the demographics. We have got the best demographics in the world. Our populations will become healthier, wealthier, more productive, and more connected, partly because of our clients as well, the telcos, for example. And secondly, we have a lot that the world doesn't have, and let me just mention one item of it, the rare earths. In 1987, Deng Xiaoping said, the Middle East has oil, we've got rare earths. South Africa, Tanzania, Madagascar, and a couple of other countries also have rare earths. And the question is, how are we going to exploit those in the context of the global environment and the competitive environment? Okay. And so notwithstanding all those negative things, our clients and ourselves will continue to look for opportunities to trade, to connect, to move the money, and to give people hope. So the summary is, notwithstanding those headlines, we believe that there are opportunities to make money.
Okay.
Sorry.
So we've got the cards.
We've got the cards, and we've got to play them smartly.
Okay. Okay. Dr. Agnes, do you agree? Are you also decidedly optimistic, notwithstanding what's going on elsewhere in the world and even here on the continent?
She may only speak if she promises not to beat me up. The last time she beat me up.
Is that an instruction or an invitation?
I don't know.
Okay.
No, but
Yeah.
I'm really happy to be here. It's not every day that I get a chance to speak to private sector about African agriculture, but it's also not every day that I get to be associated with a bank. I do believe Standard Bank is taking the charge in helping the continent lead with the green economy, which is where we are today. So I just wanted to appreciate that. But here is the real conversation, agriculture in Africa. So I grew up in agriculture. I'm daughter of a smallholder farmer, and most of us think that Africa's agriculture is stuck somewhere in the mud, is frail, is not delivering. But in the last 30 years, every decade, African agriculture has grown by 400 million tons, every decade. So in the last 30 years, we've grown from 400 million to 1.2 billion metric tons. So if you think this sector is not growing, it's not true. It's driven, of course, by urbanization. It's driven by sophistication of diets. It's driven by quality and quality issues in food as people want more processed food. All these are opportunities for investment. The next myth that I would like to bust: African businesses are small. $300,000, $500,000, but they are by no means doing small business in agriculture. They are moving, of the 1.3 billion metric tons that Africa produces every year, 1.1 billion is moving. It's not consumed where it's produced. And that's happening because there's a private sector that is moving this food around. That happens because there's a private sector that ensures that this food is being produced. I just wanted to be clear that there's a private sector that is actually very vibrant and that must continue to grow. The next myth is our biggest agricultural opportunity is not agricultural exports. It's only a very small, tiny share of African agriculture. Our food market is 10 times the size of our export market. So I know when we are here as businesses, we think, okay, cocoa is the big thing, coffee is the big thing. No. It's maize. It's soybean. We are not producing anywhere near enough the animal feed we need to produce on this continent. So I'm just trying to make sure that you understand. Then the last one I want to bust is Africans are not subsistence farmers. Mm-hmm. That was in the 80s. 55 to 60% of the food that is produced, that is eaten in rural areas in Africa is bought. There's a market. It's not just the the urban communities, which have grown, by the way, from 145 million to now, 500 million today in the last 30 years alone. So yes, but the real thing, business, where we need to take responsibility and where I wanted to challenge all of us, is where we are still importing $50 billion worth of food. This $50 billion, $34 billion is made of 4 commodities we can produce on the continent. It's rice, which East Africa, West Africa can do a fantastic job of. It's wheat and soybean, which Southern Africa and parts of Ethiopia and Egypt can be a fantastic job of. It's, I had written them here. It's rice, it's wheat, it's maize, and it's oil seeds. All these things we can produce, but we will only do them if the Africa Free Continental Trade Area works. That's the only way we'll do them, because they are not produced in each of our countries. There are opportunities that sit in different countries that we must cooperate around to be able to move and ensure that they work.
Sure.
These are markets that we can move. So have I burst some myth?
No. You've sowed the seeds of a very objective view, and so thank you for that. And
Yeah.
I would argue not only in terms of what we can produce, but I think that what we can also add value to.
Yeah.
I was shocked to learn during April, the initial Liberation Day announcements, that the cashews that I love to eat have to get sent to Vietnam first before they come to me. So I hear you, but I'm sure we'll expand as we continue this discussion on reshaping the narrative. Mr. Matozoma, sir, a fellow blue bloodder, I would say, no stranger to the Standard Bank Group, both with internally and externally. Your fellow panelists have expressed I think, 6, 7 out of 10 in terms of optimism, in terms of how you're feeling? 8 out of 10. It sounds like some of the calculations that get done with tariffs, but in any case, we'll see what others say. And 8 out of 10 in terms of how they're feeling about Africa's ability to push through what is happening right now. In fact, one of the opening comments that we did here is that it's Africa's time now, although I would argue that I've been hearing that for as long as I've been talking to you, and it's been a long time, sir, as a journalist. But how are you feeling about the environment as a business person and our ability to rise above the tide, as it were, sir?
I do share the optimism. Maybe I put it even at 9.
9.
Yes, because, and I'm a believer in that the progress for Africa does not lie in Washington, given the current conjecture. It actually lies in Africans talking to each other, reshaping their narrative, strengthening their relationships and trade connections. Struck by the latest visit by presidents to Washington. That's why I'm making the comment about our salvation does not lie in Washington. I was sharing with Sim this morning, though, that a friend of mine told me a story that a dying mafia don was asked by a Catholic priest to renounce the devil and accept Jesus Christ. And his response was, "This is not a time for new enemies." So we don't need new enemies. But at the same time, we must not confound ourselves by thinking that actually our resolution lies in quelling those fires as a priority that we need. I believe that the demographics have been mentioned, but those demographics needs to be enabled in order to be able to participate in the economies. And speaking from the network industries, one of the critical changes that we need to do and understand the opportunity is the fact that we have the capability to provide connectivity to the African youth. The challenge that we need to meet, which is an interesting one, is how to make sure that smart devices penetrate the various markets. And I speak as a chairman of the Vodacom Group, which operates mostly from here to Egypt on the eastern part of the continent. And we're looking at a population of about 600 million people. And we're looking at where the penetration is today and what the potential is. And the solutions that we're providing in order to enable an African child to have access to a smartphone and see what they do with it is to make sure that the payment of, for instance, for the device, the manufacture of the device is in country, and that the payment systems enables a person to be able to access a smart device and pay for it as they go, like even on a daily basis. So, and those are the kinds of things that we should be putting our energy on, and then the agriculture, gets enabled. We're told yesterday at a workshop at Vodacom that one of the solutions that's been provided through the network industries is how to get fertilizer, subsidized fertilizer, to the farmer. In the past in Kenya, what used to happen is that the big boys, usually boys, buy up all the government supplies and hoard them, and then release them into the market to create artificial scarcity. But now every farmer anywhere can actually buy their fertilizer, pay through M-Pesa, and be able to have it delivered or pick it up. And the impact is what she was saying.
Okay, a 9 out of 10. Curious, how many agree with that score, 8 to 9? And you mustn't work for the Standard Bank Group because I feel like you'll be biased if you do raise your hands. 8 to 9, is that what you'd give it? Yeah, I also wouldn't give it an 8 to 9, and that's why I asked that question. But we'll get into the debate. Payments, very much part of resetting the narrative, and to just pick up on what Mr. Makhozoma did say about our savior is not in Washington necessarily. It's about Africans coming to the table and talking to one another and collaborating with one another. So maybe you can just give me your sentiments about what that collaboration is looking like right now in resetting the narrative from a payments point of view, just given the fact that you are leading a system, so as it were, that encourages collaboration across African currencies right now.
Thank you, Vivian. Thank you, Standard Bank, through the Group CEO, for inviting us here. And also let me thank you that it's the first bank across Africa that understood the vision for payments and PAPs and how to integrate African payments infrastructure. Let me take a step back.
I think they get an applause there.
I thought I should. So Standard Bank, you've been doing very well. Thank you for that. And the collaboration is really good. We appreciate. Let me take a step back to history. In 1963, when the heads of state met in what we used to call OAU at that time, one of the resolutions was that Africa must have its own clearing system. They called it a clearing system then. So it showed how important this was. And guess what? SWIFT came 10 years later and it's doing billions. Actually, 80% of intra-African transactions are routed and settled outside Africa.
80.
8%, 80%. So had we woken up when our forefathers said it, you would see where we would be. Now, why is a payment important? The most important economic activity you can ever do is a payment. She talked about agriculture and trade. You have to pay for it. He has to pay for the business. So payments is a bedrock of the economic activity. And globally, there are 4 challenges of cross-border payments globally, but Africa, of course, adds more. I'll come to it. One, it's access. Who is accessing the payment system? You find normally it is the big banks, Standard Bank and the rest, and your top clients, him and the rest. Number 2, you have the cost. The cost is usually very high for individuals and small entities to afford. Number 3 is transparency. As the payments moving from Zimbabwe to Eswatini and first takes a route to US or Europe, the transparency it loses transparency. And also the speed. How fast can I get my money? The economists will also know that the velocity of money affects the businesses. And so once money is faster, then there's economic activity. So those 4 are global challenges that we must solve. Now, for Africa, there's even more. One, we have multiple currencies. So you have to convert the rand into something else and then to the dollar and then back. Number 3 is that we also have other problems like our payment systems are, I wouldn't say fragmented, but siloed. It's within regions and other regions. So the regions I'm not talking. Now, how do we solve that? The Afrexim Bank and the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System. These are the 4 challenges that we come to solve. And this is what we are looking at work in the private sector. And we are a multilateral, which is owned by governments. And that's why private banks like Standard Bank, working with us, now solves that because we get down to the root of the problem. The other is what I can talk about is Africa. I'm very optimistic about Africa.
And I'm as well.
I'm very optimistic where we are moving with Africa.
So what's that, 7, 8, 9 out of 10?
I think I go to about 98 to 9% around there. I'm very confident.
Okay.
And why am I?
Tell me.
Because we are embracing technology so much. We have a young population. Look at how mobile money has spread across Africa. Billions are going through that. Now, that means we can own our own infrastructure, run with it, and make things happen. That's why I'm 90% confident. And that's why perhaps we have taken a decision to now onboard fintechs directly, those that are within the prudential norms. So as much as we think that somehow things are not moving, I think leveraging what we have today will help us. Now, lastly, that will help us owning our own story and owning our own payments infrastructure will allow us to retain our data. We used to say that there was the gold today is the data that we have. We used to say that people have taken our gold away. But now, in the modern world, the data is the gold. So that will enable us sovereignty of our own systems and owning and keeping our own data and hence keeping our wealth.
Sure.
So that's where I can end on that, to give that kind of foundation.
Okay, not end pause. Because Sim, as well as Saki, as well as John, one of the reasons perhaps I wouldn't give the picture right now as high as a scoring as yourselves is because it would imply that as Africans, we are all on one page in reshaping this narrative. And I'm concerned that we are not on one page. So, and perhaps you can help allay that in terms of we are not working in silos and we're working together, because in order for us to do this successfully so, like what is happening in other parts of the world whereby they're under one vision with 2030 and all of that, it needs to be as a collective. And so to you, I would ask, to what degree are we a collective, and what will it take to foster greater collaboration between your counterparts, both in the boardrooms as well as in the cabinet rooms, to work towards one common purpose?
Fifi, maybe by making reference to institutional arrangements and their importance, and the importance both of governance and infrastructure, if I may. The first is the Africa Continental Free Trade Area that is under which PAPS exists, is a massive opportunity for all 54 countries to reduce the barriers that restrict the movement of goods, capital, people, ideas, and effectively money. So that's the first thing. We've got the institutional arrangement. People are doing things that are necessary to facilitate those movements, and PAPS is just a living example of that, and a partnership between the private sector and the public sector. The second example I would want to make reference to is the G20. South Africa has the privilege to be president of the G20, and under the G20 you've got the B20. The B20 exists to support the outcomes that will result in the communique that will be issued by the G20. And South Africa has taken a view that not only is it a South African opportunity, but it's an African opportunity. In that, I have the privilege of chairing the Finance and Infrastructure Task Force, which addresses exactly your question. And in that task force are people from Zimbabwe, Kenya, Tanzania, etc., from all corners of the world, but a large proportion of which are from the African continent. One of my co-chairs is Samaila, who will be speaking, I think, a bit later, from the AFC, Strive Masiwa, and a number of other people that have got an interest in the African continent. There are 3 sets of recommendations we're going to make. So that's Africa, that's the G20, that's the B20, and what are we doing in that process? The 3 recommendations are simply this. First, focus on critical infrastructure, and my colleagues have made reference to it. 600 million people don't have access to the grid, and I see my dear friend, the CEO of Eskom is here.
Hi, Dan.
We are working hammer and tongs to increase the access of that 300 million people to the grid. The connectivity was made reference to. So firstly, focus on critical infrastructure, including things like arguing that we should build more data centers on the continent. Why? Because we've got copper in the copper belt. It's the best copper in the world. It's better than the copper in Peru. You need copper for the purposes of building your data centers. You need power. The geothermal in East Africa is fantastic. Even a failed lawyer like me can understand the engineering.
Are you a failed lawyer, or you chose a different career?
I chose a different career.
Okay.
You just dig a hole and you get the geothermal power. Build your data centers. The knowledge, skill, and talent exists in East Africa. So why do you not build your data centers there? Okay. That's the first piece. The second one is put in place mechanisms that improve the ability of the private sector and the public sector and philanthropy. Give them the ability to access those projects. Now, here's a quick statistic. The continent needs $170 billion a year for infrastructure, but can only raise $85 billion. Where's the other $85 billion going to come from? Well, we think it'll come from making it easier for the private sector to lend. How do you make it easier? By way of example, one of the recommendations is that the Basel III rules need to change so that the risk-weighted assets that you hold result in you holding less capital. If you hold less capital, you'll be able to do more projects. So that's one of the recommendations. And there's a series of recommendations we make there. The other one is reduce the cost of capital. There are many things to be done. Governments need to be more transparent. They need to improve their fiscal and monetary policy management, and they need to improve their investor relations. Ratings agencies need to have more people on the ground on the continent, more people participating in the formulation of the models, both the evaluative ones and the credit decision-making processes. So that's the second one. The third one and last one, which is important for our clients, is that we are insisting that the money that flows from the financial institutions, so the multilaterals, the banks, the insurance companies, philanthropy, into those projects should flow through the economy and to businesses, particularly small to medium enterprises. There are many things to be done, one of which is put rules in place that speed up the payment process.
Okay.
So don't take 90 days, pay them immediately, for example. So those are the 3 sets of recommendations.
Okay.
They're happening, they're concrete, and they will produce great outcomes, which gives you the reason for believing that it's 9 out of 10.
Okay. Sid, the failed lawyer who has out-argued me, I'll hold my argument there. But Saki, I want to pick up with you because in terms of one of the interventions that Sim mentioned, he's talking about mechanisms to make it easier for business to go on and shape Africa's tomorrow, South Africa's tomorrow, and big business and small business alike. And it's a question to you about those mechanisms and the operating environment right now. Is there anything that you would change about the operating environment, the regulatory environment, the policy environment, so that could help accelerate what we're trying to achieve right now in resetting the African narrative and unlocking further opportunities for SMEs?
Thank you. Your initial question to Sim was also about the fact that some other jurisdictions have a singularity of purpose and therefore are able to drive certain... my view on that is that the demographic that we have will create those connections, irrespective of where the politics are today and may seem to be portending in terms of direction.
You mean the youth?
No, the young people that our children are going to do that. And if our leaders think that they're going to stop them, it's almost like putting toothpaste back into the tube. So that ultimately is what is going to drive the direction of this. They're not going to wait for all of these things that Sim is talking about, which the private sector and governments are appropriately engaged on. But they're going to push beyond those boundaries. And so that's what gives them the optimism as well. In terms of what we should be doing further, I believe that, particularly in the private sector, what we should be doing is to share, particularly in infrastructure more, and I'm talking particularly about the communications industries, to share infrastructure even more, to collaborate more, to create scale and access. And I've spoken about the issues of access. Those put together will actually be catalytic in terms of changing the pace, changing the singularity of purpose.
So who drives that sharing? Is it the policy level? You guys get together as business, MTN there, Vodacom, maybe Starlink, and say, let's share the pie?
It's both and. Because what Sim was referring in terms of the organized business community worldwide is one of those instruments. The other instruments is industry associations. Because when you talk about collaborate, share, and scale, we run into competition issues, especially in a country like South Africa.
You must be happy with the
Obviously, we
news you
have to be
received.
very careful when we deal with those kinds of issues. I mean, we've had the massive deal at Vodacom that was disallowed by competition authorities.
It looks better now.
Sorry?
The deal looks better now. The prospects are looking a bit brighter, according to the
Oh,
latest
yeah,
communique.
according to latest news. But I'm saying that there are constraints as far as is concerned. But what is going to drive us is actually the people. We need, for instance, to democratize AI and make it possible as a tool in the hands of the young people, together with the ethics that go with that. Because there are ethical issues that need to be considered in so far as that. But if we think that there is any government that is going to be, or government policy or regulatory authority that is going to stop young people from embracing these technologies, we're mistaken.
Okay. A fantastic decree there. Dr. Agnes, just in terms of the matter of inclusion, and I think that it fits in very well with resetting the narrative as well. Saki was talking about, in the traditional sense, it was the big boys that bought a whole host of this product and kept it and did things to maximize in the profit. Of course, when we do talk about agriculture, we talk about inviting a lot more of the young people that are going to drive the change that he mentioned, but also a lot more people that look like me and you. And the other wonderful ladies in this room, of course. And what needs to change in that regard to make the narrative, particularly when it comes to agriculture, a lot more inclusive and representative of the picture of this continent?
There are already lots of efforts in place to try to make the agriculture sector more inclusive. We do, everybody has said it, we do recognize that 77% of our population today is below 35. Below 35. So if we have a major economy, which the agricultural sector is, and we are not including these people, then it's a problem. But also we do have technologies that are now driven by young people. So what the agricultural sector today is trying to do is actually trying to create spaces that allow the inclusion of young people. The organization I was working for, AGRA, actually, has acquired close to $400 million just to create spaces for young people, to create hubs, to create business ecosystems, to think through new businesses, to create partnerships that will advance young people, to create new ways of working with land. In Africa, land, again, belongs to either governments or the big boys. So we are also thinking about how we create opportunities for land that allow young people to access land. China has a land market that is open. If you use land, you get land because you want to use land and because you have a business that is about using land. You don't just own and sit on land,
Sure.
which we are doing a whole lot of in Africa. So advancing some of those things that will allow young people and women to access land when they need to use it as a business opportunity and have laws and policies that protect that is extremely important. And financial inclusion is one of the biggest things. Because of lack of access to land and lack of access to property, these same people have a challenge of having access to financial inclusion because our finances are still built about what you have. And yes, we are starting new ways of thinking about financing based on the history you're building and all that, and we appreciate that, but it's not there. It's not there enough to be able to include women. So technology is one of the things that we can piggyback on. It's really beginning to provide opportunities for women, again, to build that history, for young people to be included because they don't want to do the old agricultural ecosystem,
Sure.
but there are new ways of engaging in the sector. So I do think that with the government's interest in designing policies that recognize the need to incorporate women and youth, including research. You would be amazed at the number of crops that women engage around that have new products in terms even of genes. We have a number of commodities that have been enhanced over time, but we do have crops that are called forgotten crops because they usually are in the sphere of women. And research is beginning to look at that and actually advance this so that yields for those crops that are specifically grown by women or women are interested in can start yielding more. I'm 100% sure that once they start yielding more and having market value, men will start being interested as well. So I hope we won't chase them out. But those are some of the initiatives that have to be taken. Real serious policy ecosystems that think about the areas that are leaving women behind. Access to inputs. When women have access to inputs, they produce 30% more than they actually are producing today.
Sure.
So how do we close that input gap? How do we close the finance gap? How do we close the land access gap and ensure that women have that access as much as everyone else? But how do we close the knowledge gap as well? And the technology is the answer. We are now really beginning to look at AI-based advisory in East Africa is becoming the thing where we are linking climate services, market services, and extension services into one so that farmers, and in 2 local languages so that farmers can have access to that information.
So a lot of gaps to close, but unfortunately the 10 minutes that is left for this discussion won't allow us to get into the full details. We'll get into that, I suppose, in the networking. But John, perhaps maybe you can weigh in briefly before we do open it up to the audience perhaps for their engagement and their input in what we're talking about right now in unlocking the the economic opportunity and value for small businesses as well. Most of you have made reference to the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Of course, a lot of the businesses and companies that will be driving the increased activity and potential there are your SMEs. So this is necessarily one for them. What would you change from any ecosystem or any sphere, regulatory, policy, even perhaps a business will, in accelerating the kind of traction that we are seeing under the AfCFTA right now, sir?
Thank you very much. If I can weigh in on that, I would say that small businesses have maybe 3 or 4 problems. One is access to markets, 2 is access to capital, and 3 is the regulatory environment, how they are treated, how we view them. Now, in the first one is what we're trying to do at the Afreximbank or at PAPS. We have collaborated with the African Development Bank to make sure that we can link the payments to the stock exchanges across Africa. So we can create one stock market so that SMEs can access funding and capital across Africa. So wherever there's access capital, then SMEs can access it through the Africa. So in terms of the policy-wise, that means regulators must ensure that they access those platforms. We can put that platform in place. However, it has got to be used by easing the regulatory and other policies that.
How's it going, the work with the exchanges? Is it going well?
It is going very well. We are in collaboration with the African Stock Exchanges Association. We've had MOUs. We are now integrating. We are seeing those that can move very fast. We have one in West Africa, another in East Africa, so that we can link all that region. Because, as I said, the problems are disintegration. We have West Africa not talking to East Africa and Southern Africa as well. So if these speak together, then SMEs can raise capital from a level. The second problem is the market itself. So at Afreximbank, we've created what we call the trade information portal. So once SMEs are registered now, everyone has access to their information. What they trade, what are the regulatory hurdles in that market, how do I now access those goods and that market, and now how can they pay, and then there's PAPS to pay through. So this is how we're trying to kind of bring all of them together. And as I said, now the regulatory environment must create that very well. Mm-hmm. So what we've done at PAPS, we have a governing council of central bank governors. So these meet and have one common regulatory kind of environment around their payments infrastructure and how the payments are going to be made across those markets. So it would, our discussion with the Global Association of African Central Banks that ease up. Let's now make it more African rather than the 15 countries or 16 countries where we are. So this is how we are approaching it in terms of supporting SMEs to be able to access markets and payments and also access capital.
Okay. Questions? Anyone in the room with around 7 or so minutes left? Oh, I've got plenty. I can go on. And some has an answer to a question that hasn't been asked. Yes, sir.
Well, while the colleagues are thinking, I just wanted to pick up on solutions. So at Standard Bank, we've got the Trade Barometer, which really gathers data information that business people would need for them to make decisions in their own jurisdictions and across border. Secondly, we've got a product called BizFlex. It allows traders and small businesses to have flexible repayment terms for their loans based on their own cash flows rather than strict installments. So that speaks to the access to capital. Our products are now simpler, better, faster. It's much easier for people sitting at a coffee shop to open an account with Standard Bank, whether they're in Tanzania or Kenya, because we've got the technological capability. And there are a number of other products. We allow people invoice discounting to allow them to have access to working capital. And so for colleagues sitting in the room wondering about what the solutions are, both for the purposes of getting liquidity and capital in country or trading, the relationship managers that are asked to stand up will do it for you.
Okay.
So I just
So
thought I
can I
would,
ask a question?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I had
Also-
promised to be quiet, but
no, we don't want you quiet. We don't want you quiet. Just don't beat him, he said.
But you know, I like the whole idea of flexible payment because the
Yeah.
agricultural sector is seasonal. It's a sector where income comes in once and then you're sitting
Yeah.
for a number of months without cash flow. And this is something that would really, really be great and probably change the game in how businesses do agriculture and some of the failures that are associated with the sector. And I just think that this is a fantastic product that most of us need to know about, and I even
Yeah.
didn't know about it. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a great product.
Yeah.
Okay. Because it comes from your bank.
It just
No,
works.
I'm just
Yeah.
joking. I'm just joking. Questions? Any other questions before we wrap things up? No. Okay. No, that's fine. So I wanted to actually say then that the great product, you're talking about the solutions, and it seems as though then the issue is not that we don't have the solutions, it's scaling those solutions such that more and more of us are in agreement and are aligned with the optimism that you share as a panel for the present picture of the African continent and the outlook. So, Mr. Makhozoma, I'm asking you, in terms of scaling these solutions, sir, who needs to do what, in your view, to ensure that this optimism, it's really felt and it reverberates far and wide across the 54 or 55 countries in this continent we call home?
Well, this session is cast as changing the narrative, resetting the narrative. And I think it's the best way to start, because I think what also causes pessimism on the continent is how we tell our story or how we do not tell our story and share. I mentioned, for instance, in one of my remarks that at Vodacom we're looking at how we enable people to get access to the technology that we talk about. And I'm not too sure that we share that story as much as we should be doing. We're not sharing the story of M-Pesa, which is person-to-person largely, system, platform, that we're handling per day $3 billion per day that goes through these platforms. Therefore, I think this story needs to be told because the implication of that kind of a scale is the fact that there is no absence of money on the continent. There is money, and the question is, to what productive use can we convince people to put that money so that the agriculture work, so that all of the other ideas that we've spoken about on this panel are also made up to scale. So I think resetting the narrative and telling the stories, and also I want to finally say that the thought about collaboration and the thought about sharing and scaling is something that we need to be in conversation with each other about. For instance, Standard Bank to M-Pesa to the payment system to agriculture.
Yes.
We need to be sharing at the leadership level and saying what are our goals for the near term and what are the things that we need to have removed or ameliorated.
You know, you mentioned a really important story, and I think I'm going to steal an extra minute or so just to get your thoughts, sir. You say it's how we tell our stories, and I'm going to ask you to put your background on as a fellow colleague of journalism then, in terms of telling the stories, because one would argue that the journalists, and many of them are in this room, have an important role to play. How do you think the industry can be better capacitated to do a more comprehensive job in telling stories? Feel free to maybe, talk about that $3 billion in M-Pesa that you move coming towards the industry's way.
I can look back in my days at the ANC, actually, as a head of information and publicity at the ANC. And at that time, because we're trying to change the narrative of the ANC ascending to power from this group of terrorists who know nothing about governance, we were in dynamic communication with journalists on a daily basis, talking about these things so that the background to the stories that they were writing was well understood. And the honest relationship between us as people who were trying to get that narrative across was very, very important, that we must make sure that there is trust between us and the journalists. And that, I think, is missing, that conversation today.
A conversation, I suppose, for another day. So, John, we're going to give you the final word as our time is coming to an end.
My final word would be, let's collaborate together. Let's work together. Let's work together to exploit what we have, and let's retain our sovereignty and independence, because true independence is economic independence.
100%, full stop. True independence is economic independence, and I couldn't agree more. Can I close?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, sir. I always can tell when you have something to say, and I feel like you had something to say, but you held back because time is up. I couldn't agree with you more, and I think that I am an observer. Many of us, particularly in the media, are observers of the work that you do, and sometimes perhaps a picture is not completely accurate from a position of looking from outside within, but you guys have given us the perception of what it does look like within your roles, looking inside and being close to the coalface, as it were. I believe you when you say that this continent has great prospects. I agree with you that we do have the solutions that are warranted to reshape the narrative, and we need to put them into practice. But moreover, I stand by you when you talk about the importance of collaboration and ultimately achieving our goals. And I think that we'll be hearing a lot more about collaborating and working together throughout the 2 days. But for now, I would like to thank you for your time. With a warm applause, please help me. Thank you. So we have essentially shaken on it, and I know that in business, shaking on terms means that the deal is done, hopefully. So ladies and gentlemen, as I do wait from my colleagues in the technical to prepare the stage for the next setting that will be taking place right now. We heard throughout the discussion about the average age of the typical African right now. We heard, I think it's Dr. Agnes who said over 70% under the age of 35. I can say that many of us in this room don't qualify, myself included, by the way. I have a good doctor. But nonetheless, it is actually levied as one of the criticisms that hold this country and this continent back from truly rising to its potential. The fact that we have leaders both across the boardrooms and across the cabinet rooms who are not reflective of the individuals that they lead and the energy that these individuals, of course, display. But I think that one country right now that is showing us a little bit of something different, one of the few countries that are showing us a little bit of something different right now, is a country that, say what you will about it, many of the people from the hometown, Soweto, that I'm from, will characterize it as a country that has more cows than people. But it is a country, of course, that is known recently for the bold moves in leadership that it is making. And it is therefore my honor and true privilege, ladies and gentlemen, to welcome to the stage right now His Excellency Ndaba Kgaolate, the Vice President as well as the Minister of Finance of the Republic of Botswana. May I ask that we please rise and give him a respectful welcome. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Good morning. A story is told of a pastor who was giving a sermon to his church. And he says that if he was to leave this earth and go to heaven, he would be met by 3 surprises. The first of those would be to find people he did not expect to find in heaven. The second would be not to find those he expected to find in heaven. And the third one would be to find himself in heaven. So I am surprised to find myself here. I'm also surprised to see some people I did not expect to find. And I suspect I'm also surprised not to find people I expected to find. What a privilege to be here this morning. Normally, people say, before they speak, they say, I stand on the protocol that has already been pronounced. Whenever you hear anybody saying that, you know for sure they don't know the protocol. So I have to admit I don't know the protocol. But I am told the former, you call it deputy president, the former vice president of South Africa is in our midst, Dr. Phumzile Mlambo Ngcuka. And I wish to recognize her. I wish to recognize my neighbor, Mr. Sim Shabalala. I wish to recognize Mr. Bill Blackie, Miss Margaret Nainaba. The other day when I was flying, I met a gentleman. I said hello to him. And I said to him, you look like someone I read about in a newspaper many years ago when I was still a student, and that name is Mr. Saki Makuzuma. He says, yes, I am Saki. So I just saw him sitting here. So ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, visionaries of Africa, and the not so gentle ladies and men. It is a profound honor to stand before you today as an African, nourished under and by the golden sunrises and the sunsets of the land-linked, arid savanna lands of Botswana. I'm grateful and moved that the Standard Bank Group has invited me to this platform, not merely to speak, but to dare. I dare to imagine an Africa that rises, not slowly, but decisively. An Africa whose time is not coming, but has come. There is not a place in the universe like Africa, whose being, whose songs and dances, whose melodies and whose poems, whose humanity, whose wealth beneath and above the soils, whose talents and whose wild berries are as nourishing and as beautiful. When I choose to dare, it is not because I am courageous, nor that I'm special. I dare because I'm a son mothered by an Africa that gives more than we can ever give back or be able to give back to. And we gather today under the banner Africa Unlocked, business shaping Africa's tomorrow. This is not just a conference theme, it is a charge. It is a sermon, a sermons, and a generational mandate. Africa is too wealthy a place to be attended to by donor aid. We possess all the ingredients for our own transformation. The men and women of authentic enterprise, business, are the seeds of our own spectacular transformation. There is no other choice but for the sons and daughters of enterprise, business, to run with the future of this continent. Distinguished friends, Africa is not a problem to be solved. Africa is a civilization with memory. Long before colonial borders divided us, we built cities, we governed empires, we traded across the oceans, and we mapped the stars. Ancient wisdom cries out in the streets, as Proverbs 1:20 says, and Africa has always had this core. We are not inventing the African economy, we are restoring it. And the agents of that restoration are not governments alone. The authentic authors of our transformation, as I said, are the sons and daughters of enterprise. Perhaps you'll understand me better when I say they are the entrepreneurs, the inventors, the builders, the innovators, the dreamers, and the rabble rousers like myself. So let us stop speaking of Africa as a continent with potential. And I agree in one heart that that language is outdated. Let us speak of Africa as a platform for performance, because the world's next economic miracle will be African, and it will be led by enterprise, by business, private and community enterprise. Today we are 1.55 billion strong, and according to the African Development Bank, by 2050 we will be 2.5 billion, meaning that 1 in 4 people on earth will be African. 60% of us are under 25. We are not just the world's youngest continent, we are the boldest. But youth is not a blessing by default. It becomes dividend only through vision and investment. The AFDB projects that we must create 450 million jobs by 2050. That cannot be done through public works alone. It must be driven by private and community capital, by private and community innovation, and private and community enterprise. Let us aim even higher. Africa must not only absorb its youth, but it must export African solutions to global problems, from AI-driven agriculture to decentralized clean energy. We must not just catch up, we must leap ahead. The private and community sector is not a partner. It is more than a partner. it is a driver. And as highlighted in the Boston Consulting Group, by the Boston Consulting Group, between 2016 and 2023, private equity volumes in Africa grew by more than 116%, and values grew by more than 46%. That is more than just good performance. It is a powerful signal of what is possible. Yet Africa still attracts less than 1% of global private capital. And the evidence suggests that while private capital is growing, assets under management in Africa are less than 1% of GDP, compared to 5 to 6%, 5 to 7% globally. That is not a lack of opportunity. It is a failure of imagination. And it's time we change this narrative. Government-led growth has run its course. With rising debt and narrowing fiscal space, Africa's future must be private sector-led. But this requires courage. It requires us to cut the red tape and to reform the laws. It requires us to build public-private ecosystems where capital is welcomed, is protected, and is multiplied. It requires men and women of integrity, men who believe in fairness, men and women who believe in uniting people and ideas, men and women who believe in inclusive prosperity. We need a new investment doctrine anchored in 4 strategic frontiers for Africa's economic breakthrough. We need an energy liberation. Africa faces a major energy access gap. Various reports submit that 600 million Africans live in the dark. This is not an infrastructure gap. It is a moral outrage. Energy is not about kilowatts and gigawatts, but it's about hospitals running, about classrooms learning. It's about factories producing. We need digital. Go digital as a birthright. Africa's fintech boom has already rewritten the rules of financial access. Now we must go further and build African Silicon Valleys, data-rich, mobile native, and AI-powered. In the 21st century, platforms will outpace pipelines, and we must own them. Trade must be part of this transformation. The Africa Continental Free Trade Area should not, is not, cannot just be policy. It is Africa's greatest infrastructure project. With 1.4 billion people under one market, we must now build the bridges. We must build the trade corridors. We must weave the digital customs and the payment systems. Only 16% of our trade is intra-African, and this must change. In Africa, human capital should be our national wealth. Education should and is infrastructure. Health is productivity, and agriculture is dignity. Investing in people is not charity. It is the most profitable business model on the continent. Distinguished friends, and friends who might not be as distinguished. Allow me to speak now not only as an African. Allow me to speak as a son of the Savannah lands, a son of the Makgadikgadi Pens, a son of the majestic Okavango. Botswana is undergoing a bold and unprecedented transformation. Through this Botswana Economic Transformation Program, a rigorous, a fast-paced national initiative, we are extending our hand of partnership in the harnessing of our economy to the world like we have never done before. As of July 1st, we launched an intensive 12-week acceleration program designed to unlock private sector and innovation-inspired growth across strategic sectors. We are inviting the world's most ambitious investors to partner with us. And in return, we are prepared to facilitate your investment at the speed of light. A whole-of-government task force has been mobilized to fast-track high-impact proposals in energy, in agriculture, in fintech, in tourism, in manufacturing, and more in the month of August. Whether you are a multinational giant or a tech startup with a disruptive idea, Botswana is ready to work with you. So look out. There is going to be a call for ideas, and take this rare opportunity to co-create with us a new economy built on innovation, a new economy built on execution, a new economy built on trust. The time to invest in Botswana and in Africa is now. We are not just open for business. We are building a future of African competitiveness. And we are inviting the world to build with us. Ladies and gentlemen, this is no time for cautious optimism. It is a time for audacious action. Africa does not need sympathy. It needs infrastructure. It needs capital and execution. The private sector must rise, and it must rise, not politely, but boldly. Let us not manage Africa's potential. Let us unleash it. Let us not think in billions. Let us think in trillions. Let us not play small, because Africa is not small. Africa is the world's next growth engine. Let it be said that this was the decade Africa stopped asking for permission and started writing its own script. That business did not just participate in Africa's transformation, but it led it. Whenever I'm in a room and I'm one with that room, I see everything. I just saw a great entrepreneur from Botswana, Guido. I think he's an example of a truly, truly tenacious entrepreneur. And I'm very proud as a person and as a country to be associated with an entrepreneur like him. I didn't know he was here, but I saw him. I know that from Botswana, he has used Botswana as a platform, as a template from which he has launched businesses around the world. And I hope young entrepreneurs will take a leaf from that. And I hope political leaders, not just in Botswana, but everywhere, will begin to think at least regionally, continentally. No political leader must think nationally. No political leader must have a sense of borders. I may well be from Botswana, proudly so, but my mother was South African. The Ateta is closer. But also, when I couldn't get a job in Botswana, Namibia gave me a job. So Namibia is a home. So whichever place that I'm in Africa, when I was in self-imposed exile, I spent much of my time in much of Africa, and Africa nourished me. Africa made me. Africa opened my eyes. We must think as one. We are determined in Botswana to build the best managed nation on the African continent. A paragon of fairness, a paragon of unity, a paragon of inclusive prosperity on the African continent. And this we are serious about. This we are determined to achieve. Everywhere I go, I say to young people, and I say to leaders, the time has come to have leaders who are inspired and who are true to our people's vision, who are leaders who are true and serious about learning, accumulating knowledge, knowledge that can be deployed to bring about true change. I say to young people, we need young men and women of character. We need to bring character to the fore. Discipline, fairness, integrity, excellence, diligence, patience, consideration. These are small and mundane. They may seem so, but they make the difference. And finally, we need men and women with a sense of community, who understand that alone we cannot achieve anything. Alone, we cannot glide the skies. We need each other. And we have set as a leadership in Botswana and given thought to the characteristics that we look for in investors. And we have come up with 4. We are looking for partners and investors who wish to be in it with us for the long term, who are not in it for the short term and the quick buck. That's the first. We are looking for investors with knowledge, insights, and experiences that we don't have, but which insights and experiences nourish our own journey, nourish who we are and where we are going. The third is a little embarrassing, is that we are looking for investors, Mr. Shabalala, with deep pockets. And finally, we are looking for investors who want to be associated with who we are, who want to be associated with our golden sunrises and our golden sunsets, who want to be associated with our beautiful white-headed herons and the egrets of the Okavango, who want to be associated with our savanna land and our mopane trees and our baobab trees, who want to be associated with our lions and our rhinos and our elephants and our leopards and our antelopes, who want to be associated with our dances, our poetry, our humanity, our beauty, our warmth, with the way we walk, with the way we sing. Thank you very much for inviting me today. Thank you very much for listening so attentively. Thank you very much for offering yourselves to think about, to marinate about, to interrogate ideas that will help build and shape our continent, that will help build and shape the future of our people. And let the world say, Africa unlocked itself, and the 21st century bowed in respect. May God bless you. May God bless Africa.
Thank you, Your Excellency. If you'll allow me, perhaps, in your words, not to think nationally, but I think it would be fair to say that for all of us who are not from Botswana, we envy your country. Thank you for those words. So if then the future is indeed going to be about Africa rising boldly and not politely, if we say that investing in people is not charity but a strategic choice so that you may profit from it later, and if I pick up from one of the panelists earlier, Usaki Macozoma, when he said that our salvation is not to be found in places like Washington, how do we engage in a world that seems to be against the very ideals you have just pointed out? And I'm going to mention the news that came out of Washington just this Monday. 14 countries, including key US allies, put on notice that they will face up to 25 to 40% in tariffs unless specific concessions are made. We are one of those countries that faces that uncertain future. There are many who will suffer far greater consequences than perhaps we might. Just next door in Lesotho, for example, their textile industry faces utter decimation. How do we deal with these trade wars in this uncertain time? I'm going to invite next Gulam Balim, the chief economist of Standard Bank, to make some introductory remarks ahead of the next panel discussion to be moderated by David Pilling, Africa editor for the Financial Times. After Gulam speaks, David and his panel will come onto the stage.